that's also, that's a problem for everyone. It's a problem for Muslims, it's a problem for Christians, it's a problem for everyone. And it's a problem that could really get out of hand. Now, it's not like I don't know that the Protestants and the Catholics were at each other's throats for, hundreds of years. So, but that's not the issue at the moment. So now, in Islam, there's a tremendous emphasis on Christ's doctrines as well. And there isn't any evidence that Christ himself took part in, let's say, wars.
Okay,
and so
I disagree with
it's
that.
hard.
And let me disagree with that.
What do you mean?
Okay, well, if you analyze Christ as an archetype, when he comes back in his second coming, he is going to dominate the world. And one can say, well, that's not the historical Christ. But when we're looking at him in the way that you look at,
look, that's a reasonable objection.
If we look
and
at
I understand that
a
judge has that martial element, and I don't think it's reasonable to use the archetypal representation as an argument against the historical reality. And look, I'm not saying to you that I know that what Muhammad did was wrong. That isn't what I'm saying. I'm saying that I don't understand how participation in those defensive wars, let's say, but then that was also followed by a tremendous explosion of Islamic expansion, right? The biggest empire the world had ever seen in a very short period of time, right at Europe's doors.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also followed by the severance of the Islamic faith into two major categories and internecine conflict there. And so there's that stream of armed conflict activity.
I think that you're, with respect, I don't think you're getting the history fully right here, because
that's fine. Go right ahead.
The war in Jamal and Siffin, the wars between Shia and Sunnah, or what would then be, it's not really between Shia and Sunnah, because quite frankly, Shiaism had not been established but the wars of the companions. How many people died in those wars? Do we have any numbers? For maximum, we can say.
Fair enough, man. And it's not like Christianity hasn't been rife with internecine conflict.
Yes. No, but the thing is.
But the fact is that it was almost immediately after Muhammad's death that this fracturing took place among the people that were closely allied with him, and it was a bloody fracturing. And it isn't obvious that it's been rectified.
How bloody was it? How bloody was it?
How bloody does it have to be? It doesn't take much.
Okay. Well, Jordan, let's be honest. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Look, let's be fair, right? With the wars that took place 30 to 40 years, and it wasn't immediately after, because you said that in the video, the day he died. That's wrong. It didn't happen the day he died. It happened 30 to 40 years after. It happened 30 to 40 years after. And
how many members of Muhammad's immediate family survived during that 30 years? My understanding was that most of his immediate family died in armed conflict.
Most of his immediate family died in his own lifetime.
Yes, well, I'm not speaking of them, but I'm speaking of what happened after he died.
Let's get these facts right, because...
Yeah.
Okay, look. First fact. Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we say sallallahu alaihi wasallam meaning peace and blessing be upon him. All of his children died in his life, okay, except for one. So most of the members of his immediate family, and his wife died, Khadija died, his uncle Abu Talib died, his other uncle Hamza died. They all died within his lifetime, either due to illness or due to some other cause, war, for example. Like one of the defensive wars, Hamza died. And by the way, Muhammad forgave his killer, and that's something which goes against the warlord thesis, because when he then conquered Mecca, it was actually no fighting. I'm not sure if you know this. It's called Fath Mecca. When he went into and conquered Mecca, he didn't fight anybody. It was no fighting. There were a few people that were exempted, but he actually quoted what Joseph quoted to his brothers in the Quran, which is "La tathriba alaykum al-yawm," that no blame is on you today. And this, by the way, is a bedrock example of forgiveness in Islam, because these were people that were persecuting him for 13 years. These are people that killed his uncle. Like I said, there's one person called Wahshi who literally killed his uncle and mutilated his body. And he said to Wahshi, "I forgive you, but I can't see your face because of how he said, ممكن تغيب عني وجهك وجهك عني." He said, "Can you keep your face away from me, because psychologically I can't bring my face, but I do forgive you," he said. So he forgave people that killed his own family members. And this was after he himself attempted a treaty with the pagans called Hudaybiyah. And so they broke the treaty, and that's what initiated the conquest of Mecca, which was not a conquest that was fighting. Now, if you compare this, because I think the comparison, if there's any comparison that can be or should be made, it's Jesus' second coming with Muhammad in the Medinan period, not in the Meccan period. In the Meccan period, both were being persecuted, Jesus in his life and Muhammad in the Meccan period. But Jesus, when he comes back, he will then get authority, and he will be ruling with the iron scepter, according to the Bible. He will be crushing his enemies, as it says in Corinthians, under his foot, humbling his enemies under his foot, and killing and violent stuff. So in fact, I will actually argue today that the New Testament representation of Jesus Christ in his second coming is way more violent than Muhammad's conquests in the Medinan period.
Okay, well, look, like I said, I wasn't trying to make the case. I wasn't trying to make the case that what happened in Mecca or Medina was wrong. So let me explain that a little bit. So Christian Europe fought a defensive war against the Nazis. It isn't obvious that that was wrong.
I don't think that was. I wouldn't say that's defensive.
Well, okay, fine, but I understand the concept of defensive war.
Well, when America got involved in World War II, it was not under immediate threat by Germany, and they colonized it. And here's the thing: it overtook Western Germany. You see, and here's the thing: the term warlord that you use with the Prophet, you've never used with Harry Truman. You've never used with Roosevelt. You've never used with Winston Churchill, all of which conquered countries literally in wars. Because I feel like there is a bias there, and you've actually never used it with anybody else aside from the Prophet Muhammad in your public output. And I think that's unjustifiable. I think that you have biblical prophets like Moses, you have biblical prophets like Joshua, you have the Jesus in his second coming, all of which were warrior prophets, and you've only used the term warlord with the Prophet Muhammad, and I think that is unjustifiable. I think what is it that what makes someone a warlord then? If it's conquering lands, then Harry Truman is a warlord. Then and so on and so forth. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad.
Well, I guess that's a real tough question, isn't it? What makes a warlord and what makes a just war? It's not like any of us have the precise answers to that. I think that's partly what we're trying to hash out right here.
Definitions of the word warlords. The definition of the word warlord, according to Collins, is that someone who acquires force by aggressivity and violence.
Well, okay, so fine, you push back on me, so I'll push back on you to some degree.
Okay.
Well, it's certainly the case that the expansion of the Islamic Empire was accomplished by a tremendous amount of warlike activity, and that wasn't defensive. Now, look, I understand that monotheism is